So there was a Polygon article talking about the new Grand Theft Auto, and it says that the developers are conscious of trying not to make jokes at the expense of marginalized groups and people. And it seems that all of this is to avoid this concept that I don't like it, but of punching down. That people in power are only able to make jokes about people more powerful than them rather than less powerful. And I think this is kind of dumb for a bunch of reasons. First, if you actually take that to its logical extreme, that means that once you reach the pinnacle of comedy, you couldn't make fun of anyone. Like, under that paradigm, who's Jerry Seinfeld allowed to mock? How about Chris Rock? Because, well, apparently if Chris Rock mocks people that are above him, he gets slapped on a stage. But, you know, so even logically it doesn't work out. But I actually, and do you ever really see comics targeting individual people? Or really, or actually groups? What I think I see is they target behaviors and ideas that may be associated with certain groups, and we should be able to make fun of the dumb ideas or idiosyncrasies of behaviors that may be associated but not definitive of certain groups. And the third and the last point I'll make on this is, how condescending is it to say that your group is so fragile that you can't handle a joke? You know, you just... We just think that you're too weak to be joked about, and it's this. It seems offensive to me, honestly, to say no. Sorry, we just think you're a little too fragile. I would be offended if someone said that about me.
Yeah, it's you really gotta. Part of my life philosophy and my just like core values is the bad guys, the people I'm going to be most concerned with are the people who are saying that I can't tell jokes and that we can't have comedy about them. I'm sorry, but that's how you know you're on the wrong side of things. If you're the group where people are saying that if you are made fun of in Grand Theft Auto, you need to be pissed off about it, it's like you should always be concerned when people are telling you that, because Grand Theft Auto is supposed to be raunchy and offensive. That is what Grand Theft Auto is. Same thing with Family Guy, same thing with a lot of different comedians. They're supposed to make fun of you. It's their job. And so when you hear that you need to be, when you hear that there is a group that is saying like, we won't let you tell jokes about us. This goes to another famous saying, which is like, you can tell who rules you by who you're not allowed to mock. And I'm never able to attribute any of these quotes. I don't read enough, so I don't know who to put next to the M dash for that one.
I've heard it too, and I don't have it either.
But, you know, it's a great saying because it's like, yeah, look, I'm sorry, but those are the bad guys. That's one of my things where I won't even really like debate it. Like, there are very few things I'm not really interested in debating. One of them is whether or not we should be able to tell jokes about pretty much anything we fucking want to. Comedy is supposed to be funny. Comedy's great. It makes life better. Look, the word funny comes from the word fun. If you can't be funny, you can't have fun. Like, what do you do when you hang out with your friends, ladies and gentlemen? You laugh. That's like you drink and you laugh and you do stuff that it inhibits or that leads to laughter. You know, like
and you make fun of each other.
Yes, like that's the core part of being friends with one another, especially for like boys and men, and to some extent for women as well. I wouldn't know as much, but you know, definitely for boys and men, I can say from experience, like that's half of being friends with your buddies is just shitting on them all the time, and they know that you love and respect them, and so it's funny. And you know, and that's also kind of the relationship between a comedian and their audience, is that there's a respect and a desire to instill laughter in and bring joy to the audience, and the audience needs to understand that. And so when they hear a joke they don't like, it's either because it's not funny or maybe it's offensive, and it's like, yeah, but this person was trying to make you laugh. Why should you be so angry that somebody tried to make you laugh and maybe it fell flat because either you're overly sensitive or maybe the joke's not funny? And if something's not funny, then it's not funny, and that's worth criticizing on its own because it's not doing its job. But this is the area where like I have no nuance. If somebody asked me, is there anything you're not allowed to joke about? I'd be like, no. It's a joke by definition isn't meant to harm. It's not harmful by that's what joke means, is that it's in jest. It is not serious. It's not a stump speech. It's a joke. So again, Grand Theft Auto is heavily reliant on comedy and stereotypes in its storytelling. I mean, the one that I played the most was Grand Theft Auto 4. And there are a lot of funny stereotypes in that one and stuff going on. And it's like, I just don't see how they're gonna make this game. The idea, because also, I just thought it was funny when I read like Boys Club about Rockstar Games. I'm like, I'm sure it was sure it was a boys club. They made Grand Theft Auto, like they made 5 Grand Theft Auto games. I'm sure it was a boys club, and that's part of why they're good at making Grand Theft Auto. I'm sorry, like I know it's considered offensive, but yeah, Grand Theft Auto was not really made.
Can I seize for a second on that, Scott? Yeah. This seems offensive, and it seems that there's an aspect of this is a problem with online media. Is you've got some independent writers out there that have to churn out 5 stories a day. And if you're even slightly to the left culturally and you can use the popular buzzwords creatively, it's not that hard to churn out 500-word stories with the titles, How Destiny 2 is Racist, Why Playing D&D Makes You a Sexist Pig, Cyberpunk 2077 lets you pick your genitals and why this is a win for everybody, etc. That's actually the first part of that is true. After boring, etc. It's not that the gaming community or the comedy community is itself problematic. It's just that journalists in air quotes to the listeners at these outlets, they just need to keep the headlines rolling, and so you just keep digging up these bullshit stories about how people are offended by things that there is no reason for them to be offended about.
Well, and it's especially hilarious in the gaming community. The gaming community there's a reason that everyone says like it all started with Gamergate, because it kind of did. I mean, the modern iteration of the culture wars has a subtext that people talk about sometimes, but it's been talked about less since like 2014, because it kind of started as, feminism was the first big kind of identitarian movement to really like shake things up circa 2014. And yeah, you had some of the BLM stuff coming up at the time, but that didn't become super dominant until like a couple years ago. From like 2014 to 2018, sort of going from like Gamergate to the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, feminism was like the main identity marker of the woke. It wasn't as much about like race and other things so much. And immediately there was friction between feminism and gaming, because guess what, people? Up until like the year 2012, gaming was an overwhelmingly male space. Again, I know this offends a lot of people. I love all my girl gamers out there. I love you all. I'm so glad that you're playing video games and enjoying them now, and I hope you have lots of fun playing video games for many years to come. But for like 30 frickin' years, almost no women play video games, with very few. Yeah. There were some. Kudos to all of you who've been with us since the beginning. But up until like the year 2012, gaming was overwhelmingly a boys' club. And a big part of gaming's sort of soul was this... The image you immediately think of when you think of gaming between the years like 1990 and 2010, which is kind of considered generally, I think, the pinnacle of the gaming experience, of the social gaming experience, is a bunch of young dudes sitting around in a basement, farting and eating unhealthy food and drinking soda and calling each other horrible names and being boys, if you will, being very bro-y, very toxically masculine, if you will, by today's standards. And look, so that's worth parodying on some level. There are things that are worth parodying about that. Maybe that's not the pinnacle of society, okay, farting and eating pizza and playing, Halo all day. I'm not saying that is the pinnacle of society that we should aspire to. But there was something kind of fundamentally beautiful about it. And it did feel like when the friction between feminism and wokeness appeared between that and gaming culture, it just took away something that was so joyful and fundamental to the experience, particularly of boys and young men in the early aughts and to some extent the 90s, but really the early aughts was like the pinnacle of the social gaming experience, because you had System Link and sort of the early days of Xbox Live and online gaming. And so, I don't know, I always just think of it as kind of like this thing where I'm not saying that like women came in and ruined gaming. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that feminism and wokeness came in and ruined gaming. Like, I love it that women play more video games now. That's great. That's wonderful. I know some girl gamers out there. Love all my gamer girls. But there's just there's been this incredible like 10-year period where an ideology which is so inherently incompatible with gaming. Because gaming, when I described that scene before of the kids like farting and calling each other racial slurs and eating pizza and drinking Mountain Dew and playing Halo, it's like that's so polar opposite of this woke thing. So it's just been so bizarre to see the clash, particularly between gaming. Because, like, you know, some art forms have always had kind of a liberal bent to it. You know, Hollywood has been known to be kind of a liberal bastion for 50 years. You know, but gaming has just been a shit show from beginning to end. And this feels like some kind of Rubicon that we're passing, where Grand Theft Auto is going to be woke now. It's like, for the love of God. I mean, could you imagine explaining that to somebody who is sitting in one of those basements in 2010?
Oh, yeah, no. I remember when we would, you know, you'd have 4 guys in a room playing Halo. And I remember at one point we actually said we had to do a moratorium on your mom jokes related to rocket launchers, because it got to be too much. It got overplayed. It's almost like there's a sense of hate to use this word. There's a freedom to it, and almost the libertarian sense is, do what you will, be offensive on comms. You know, when we finally got to where we weren't just playing with our friends, it was funny to be offensive because it was this. I mean, Wild West gets overly used because that's not what it was, but that was kind of just the fun of it, is get in there and just kind of fuck around. And that everyone's gotten so serious because, I'll do it twice this show, politics ruins everything. And I don't understand why I can't just be a superhero that goes out and kills aliens without having to think about how doing so makes marginalized groups feel. I'm not thinking about that on midnight on a Friday with a half-empty Red Bull while I grind out a Destiny raid. I'm a Destiny player. I mentioned it twice, so, you know. I just... this connection of whatever cause, whatever ideology, and all their different forms to everything is just so disheartening. And I would have thought, and again, we don't know what's going to happen with Rockstar. This game apparently started development in 2014, and they're maybe predicting a 2024 release, which seems... I think they had pandemic stuff. I saw an article about that. But I mean, so we don't know what this is going to end up being. But I would have hoped Rockstar would have been the one to say no, to be the middle finger that would be given to this. One thing that may provide some optimism is the gaming industry, like so many others, is becoming... so diversified. There's so many games. I mean, the Steam store is massive. And I don't console game anymore, but I presume it's the same thing there. You know, you can find those offensive games. Now, there aren't going to be the blockbusters like Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto, you know, the big Rockstar ones. The big ones come and go. But if the big blockbusters decide to go woke, I'm going to bet they're not as successful. I think there's a recently an example in the movie sense is I feel like I heard, and I don't go to the movies much, I heard everybody say how great the new Top Gun movie was, which didn't really have those woke themes, and that Buzz Lightyear, which does not do as well. People are tired of having their ideology sloppily laid on their media. If you ever see the most recent Atlas Shrugged movies based on Ayn Rand's famous novel, which is obviously ideological, they look like mid-2000s, early 2000s like Christian movies like the Left Behind series. It's like when the ideology is punching you in the face so directly, it's not entertaining and it won't make money.
No, yeah, I mean, we're seeing this all across. It's something I've talked about on the channel before. Anyone who's interested in this topic is a guy called The Critical Drinker, who just talks about, particularly movies and TV shows, the impact that wokeness has had and the punching you in the face constantly with the ideology. It does. Like you said, politics seems to frickin' ruin everything. I mean, you know, I've been watching The Boys since like 2019 or whenever that started. In the recent season, there's some good stuff on The Boys. I like a lot of the actors on that show. I like some of the stuff on that show. There were like 2 or 3 scenes of the most recent season that were so over the top and so on the nose. There are some very obvious like Trump allegories going on, and then there's like there's literally a scene in The Boys where one of the characters is like, "All lives matter," and it's so out of place and bizarre. Yeah. And weird. Anyway, so that's, you know, speaking more to the television side of things. But with gaming, I guess I always have this little flickering light of hope that it can go back to the way it was, because gamers have there's been resistance to this since day one. Like, whereas I think other industries kind of roll over there's something about gamers, man, that like they will throw a fit. It's sort of a double-edged sword. They will throw a fit over anything that really pisses them off. I will admit that about gamers. We are not we are conflict oriented. I don't know if it's the fact that we're constantly shooting people in the head in games all day, but there's something, because I remember back when like there was DRM stuff with Microsoft, they were going to not let you like share games, and then it took like 3 days for Microsoft to go from like, we are doing this, you cannot stop us, to like, okay, we're sorry. Like gamers just went that was crazy. They literally,
my immediate reaction is like, fuck that.
And it was, and Sony was shitting all over them, and it was a disaster. I mean, it basically meant that Xbox One was like dead out of the gate. It was like crazy. So gamers have a tendency to really, really push for what they care about, and I think there's still a lot of resistance to this stuff, and it's why I think of like television and movies as like these days. I'm so skeptical of almost any movie or TV show that I watch. I'm like, I wish there was like a test that I could, or like a something like a warning for a W for wokeness, and like I just don't want to deal with it. It's like annoying. It's shitty. It's in like every show. I almost did a whole video essay about Kenobi, frickin' Star Wars they ruined. So, but gaming, there's a good amount of gaming content that is not particularly woke. Probably because there's so many more games than there are movies. There's just so much more content in general. There's indie developers. And again, it's so consumer driven by a consumer base that is still pretty male. I think it's a lot less male dominated than before, which again is fine. Yeah. That's great that girls are playing, but that's fine. But it's still pretty male oriented and pretty. The spirit of what I was referring to before, with all the guys sitting in the basement screaming racial slurs and drinking Mountain Dew and farting, that's still kind of there. There's still a flicker of that, and the fact that that still hasn't gone away gives me hope that maybe gaming can kind of return to its glory days. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, I don't know. Do you think, Ben, that could happen? Is there some way to blow up the Death Star and have it come from game? I think it would be very funny. It would be a bookend to the culture wars, because everyone says it started with Gamergate, right? And so it's like, and I know I am familiar with the Gamers Rise Up meme. I know this is a little funny and a little bit hard to take seriously, but I seriously do wonder sometimes if like gamers are one of the last possible groups that have really held together against all of this to some extent. So I don't know, maybe the gamers will rise up. They seem to do it from time to time. And it's why there's,
if we hook up with the Bitcoiners, we hook up with the Bitcoiners and we can change the world.
I don't know.
I think there's one big difference, I think, between video games and like TV movies. Video games require a lot more investment of money and time. If you want to buy Grand Theft Auto, it's going to be probably about $60, and you got to install it. You got to learn how to play it. Like, if you don't know how all the controls work, you got to invest a significant amount of time into it. I think that's why we get so much more passionate about those things than maybe we do something you just push a button on Netflix. Is we have to invest, and when we're invested in something, we're willing to defend it.
I think that's an excellent point.